I think I think that probably nearly everyone here knows me more or less, just because I'm around a lot. But I'm 72 years old. I'm a Pathways of Light minister, and I've been a Course in Miracles student for the last 40 years. So, and then something happened in 2019, in June of 2019, and I experienced a significant shift, which changed everything. And everything looks the same, but it changed everything. And I'm going to talk a little bit. Well, let me just say, let's start off with a prayer, shall we?
Sure.
One of my favorite prayers is from lesson 326. And so that's what I'm going to use for a prayer today.
Okay.
I am forever an effect of God. Father, I was created in your mind, a holy thought that never left its home. I am forever your effect, and you forever and forever are my cause. As you created me, I have remained. Where you established me, I still abide. And all your attributes abide in me, because it is your will to have a son so like his cause, that cause and its effect are indistinguishable. Let me know that I am an effect of God, and so I have the power to create like you. And as it is in heaven, so on earth. Your plan I follow here, and at the end, I know that you will gather your effects into the tranquil heaven of your love, where earth will vanish and all separate thoughts unite in glory as the Son of God. Amen.
Amen.
I'll drink of water here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I love A Course in Miracles, obviously. It's changed my life, and that's like an understatement, a huge, huge understatement. I was had a couple of things happen recently. One thing is that my ex-husband's wife died the other day, and I went to her funeral yesterday. And I liked her very much, and she liked me, and I was happy to be there. I was there mostly, of course, for my daughters and my son, my daughter and my son, because that was their stepmother. That was their other mother. And I didn't think about it until I got home. But all the people there, except for my immediate family, all the people there were people who knew me when I was young and crazy and wild. And in the past, that would have been like a big deal for me. In fact, I don't know if I would have gone, because I would have been thinking about how people were looking at me and thinking of me, and not knowing me anymore. And it would have been hard for me, but I didn't even think about it until I got home. And then I just kind of laughed about it. But that's what I mean when I say A Course in Miracles changes everything. That's just not a thought that I don't have that desire to protect my image that I used to have, because it's just an image. It's not me. And that's what I know for a fact. It's not me. Myron is not me. So what Myron does or doesn't do has nothing to do with me. It's just, this is the story that I'm using so that I can see what it is in my mind that needs to be healed. And then another story I wanted to share with you is that my son came to visit for Thanksgiving, and he lives in New Orleans, about 3.5 hours from me. So we don't see each other real often. And his girlfriend was visiting with her family. And so I got to have him all to myself, which I love his girlfriend, but it was nice having him all to myself. And before he left, we were sitting around at the table, had some breakfast, and then we're just chatting. And he wanted to know what was going on with me for the rest of the day. What was I going to be doing? And I told him, I said, well, I have this talk that I'm giving, and I'm going to think about that and decide exactly how I want to do that. And so he seemed interested, and I'm very careful with my children. They're not interested in what I do. They're very kind about it for the most part, very respectful. And they admire me to some degree or another, I think. Not sure. But they're not interested. And so I don't push that on them. So I'm really careful about, what I talk about with them. And so, but he asked. So I'm telling him, I said, well, I want to talk about beliefs. And I want to talk about how we all have beliefs that affect our lives and who we think we are, and that we can change those beliefs, and that most people don't know that they think that if they have this thought in their mind, that it must be true. If they have a belief, they think that belief must be true because it's in their mind. And I said, so it's a really, really cool thing to realize that that's not true. And he says, yes, I know. He says, and there's all these voices in your head all the time, this chatter, chatter, chatter. And he said, and most of it's not true. And he says, and if you change your beliefs, if you change enough of your beliefs, you become a different person. And I'm like, wow, okay. I'll let you school me today. I was just so impressed that at his age, which he's my baby, so he's, I don't know exactly, less than 40, and that he knows this and is using it. And because I spent my my whole life, getting to that point to where I knew that was true, and where I began to actually use it. And so the only thing that I did, I told him about a couple of books I thought he would benefit from. I suggested the one that I started with, which was Dan Joseph's book, Inner Healing, which taught me to watch my thoughts, because if you don't watch your thoughts, there you go. And so, and I also told him about one I thought he would like, Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, and because it talks about a lot, especially in the beginning, about the thoughts in your mind, and how and Michael is just a great speaker and a great writer, and he's just really good explaining things in a very simple way, in a very funny way. Like he talks about that it's like your inner roommate, and that if you had a roommate that talked to you all the time like that, if there was a body across from you, you'd kick him out like in the first hour. But we just keeping company with that inner roommate. Anyway, besides those two books that I recommended, what I recommended to him was, I said, Toby, just be consistent. The more consistent you are at this, at watching your thoughts, learning to see what beliefs were behind those thoughts, and choosing better. I said that the more consistent you are about that, the faster this will go for you and the better it'll work for you. And then we talked about rage, because I know he has a lot of rage, and I used to. And so I told him that what I realized is that behind that rage was a belief that needed to come forward so it could be changed. And I said, and if we don't deal with it, we keep pushing it down, then one day it's just going to all come out. It'll be at the worst possible moment. That's just the way it happens. And I said, so it's so much better if you look for those beliefs now. And I watched him carefully, because if I do talk about anything that matters to me, anything about the course, if my kids start looking like their eyes are glazing over, I quit. But he was actually listening. So who knows? Maybe that'll be helpful to him. So that's what I wanted to talk about, because I mean, there's so many interesting things in the course, and I could pick it up any place and just start talking about it, and we would find a lot to benefit from. Um, but my focus has always been, over all the years I've been doing this, has been on how can I use this? How can it be practical to me? How can I use this to help me wake up? You know, that's what I'm interested in. How can I use it? And so I got to thinking about it. And I was thinking about how we have such a cycle going with our thinking and with our lives, because our lives are our thoughts projected outward. So we got this cycle going, and we get caught in the cycle, and it just starts over. So it starts off with like belief. But the thing is that probably we won't notice the belief. What we will notice is the thought that comes from that belief, or the feeling, the thought or the feeling. Myself, I generally notice the feeling first. If I notice that suddenly I don't feel happy, or I don't feel at peace, maybe I'll feel that little jangly feeling inside you get when you're not at peace, then I know that there's some thought, there's some belief in my mind that's interfering with my happiness and my peace. So it's really the belief that comes first, but we typically notice the feeling or the thought. If I have a feeling, well, then I look for the thought, because the thought will lead me to the belief. Then at that point, we move into choice. Now, most of the time, especially before A Course in Miracles or some other path that brings us to this, we go right past the choice. We don't even recognize that we have a choice. We just think, oh, this is how you feel, so this is legitimate, and it's not. It's just the thought or feeling is in the mind at the moment, the belief that's in the mind at the moment. But we do have a point there at which things could change, and that's a point of choice. And then from there, we go into projection. And that we can see that in a couple of different ways. We project our thoughts, our beliefs onto whatever seems to be in front of us. I think of it as a screen, projected onto the screen. Might be a person, it might be a situation. And from that projection, of course, all that also has to do with judgment. Projection, judgment, which leads to action. And then we do something or say something based on what we believe. And if we're still choosing to believe our ego thinking, that negative thinking, well, then that action might be, will also be negative, will also be from the perspective of the ego. And when that happens, and of course, at that action point, we also have another choice, and that's our perception, how we're going to perceive what we said, what we did. And if we're lost in our ego, then we'll perceive ourselves as being justified in our action and our words. Or if at that point we can choose again, and then we can look at it and go, ooh, I see what that looks like. I don't think I want this. I want to change my mind. If we stay with the negative, if we stay with the ego, if we stay with the judgment and the justification, then we're going to feel guilt. Because no matter what level of awareness we're operating from, there's a part of our mind that recognizes when we have separated ourselves from each other and from God. And so when that happens, there's this part of us that knows that we're not supposed to be separate. and that knows that we're not supposed to be judging and angry, and all the other things that come with that kind of action from a negative belief. And so we go into guilt, and then guilt causes fear because the guilty are punished, right? So we just naturally move from guilt to fear. And because it's so terribly uncomfortable, we go further into projection. Oh, it's his fault. I feel uncomfortable around him. Well, it's his fault. It's the way he treats me. It's the way he's judging me, whether he actually is or not. That's the feeling that we get. He's judging me, or some way, or we look at the situation and say, it's not my fault. I didn't do anything to cause this. And which makes us feel very defensive. Now we know who the problem is. It's that one out there. And now I've got to defend myself against that one. And how do I defend myself? Well, I'll attack them. And here we are. Now we've got proof that our belief was right. Look how I'm being attacked. Look how I have to defend myself. Obviously, I was right in my belief. And it starts over. And this is what our lives are like until our mind gets enough light that we can break these cycles. What a crazy way to live. And what a painful way to live. But the good news is, it's all it does. Nobody else is to blame, so we don't have to change anybody else. We're not to blame, we're just responsible. And we accept that responsibility. I've always said, 100% responsibility, 0% blame. Blame has no part in the mind of the Son of God. But we are responsible. And because we're responsible, we can learn to do this differently. Okay, so what I want to do is like give an actual example in my life of how this played out. Now, what I'm using is what I think of as the big, the huge forgiveness, the one that shifted me in my thinking. It's like our mind is so filled with all these dark ego thoughts that we can't see what's clearly in front of us. We can't see who we really are. We can't feel who we really are because we've got all this darkness in our mind. And so whenever we forgive something, then that darkness is gone and there's room for some light. And then we can start to see a little more clearly. And that gives us an opportunity to look at something else and let it be gone. And so I had this one thing that was like, felt very big, and none of them are really bigger or smaller than another, but it felt big to me. It was my guilt from my youth, because I felt like I was a terrible daughter to my mother. It was like I was never there for her. I was always a difficult daughter. I just had all these stories. I had so much proof. And some of it was it would just torture me as an adult. As when I was young, I didn't see it that way because I was all into projecting. It was all her fault. But as I grew older and made a lot of mistakes of my own, had children of my own, and saw how hard it was, I began to see my mother very differently. But then she died, and and it's like I was left with all this guilt. And then there was guilt from motherhood, because who does that right? It's just, there was just so many errors I made, and some of my errors were big, and especially in my mind, were very big. And it's like I know that I had many wonderful times with my children, but did I remember those? Nope. I only remembered the ones that I looked at as a mistake. The ones that I regretted. And these were the ones that would come to torture me, generally at night when I would lay down to go to sleep. I always remembered this little joke I saw where this guy's laying down on his memory pad, the little soft, cushiony thing that they call it a memory pad. And he says he regretted buying the memory pad because he could see all these memories of his past floating through his mind. Well, that was me.
Yeah.
And slowly, sorry, I got a little bit of allergy stuff here. Slowly over time, I had forgiven, and that's the best way to do it, is one memory at a time. It's less overwhelming that way, easier for the mind to adjust. And so some memory would come up and I would work with that, and I would undo, in other words, forgive. And sometimes it would take and sometimes not. Sometimes I would pick it back up again. But this had been going on for a very long time. And I one night I was laying there in bed and I thought, I've got to do something about this. I can't take this anymore. I am so done with this. So this is what I'm going to look at in terms of the cycle that we were talking about. So my feeling, the feeling that came up, the belief that I'm working with, past behavior. Past behavior was very self-centered, always looking out for me, not for the other person, very self-centered. And my belief is that I was guilty for my past behavior. And so those were the little memories that came up to torture me, were the memories that I regretted. My thought, I did something wrong, I'm guilty for it, and I should be punished. I am punished. I'm hated. I deserve to be hated. It was so weird because I so believed that's what I saw everywhere. I thought, especially like with my children, I was always, every time they were with me, it was like they were looking at me with accusing eyes. That was what I saw. Well, of course I saw that because it's what I believed I deserved. Okay, so I thought I did something wrong. I'm guilty for it. I should be punished. I am punished. My kids hate me. I deserve to be hated. Those were the thoughts that were in my mind, not necessarily so very clear. It's like the mind keeps trying to protect itself. And so I didn't maybe think, oh, they hate me. But that was the feeling. That was really what I was thinking. Okay, the feelings that came up: anxiety, depression, fear. So I had a lot of depression in my earlier life. Well into doing A Course in Miracles, I still suffered from depression for like maybe the first 10 years. It got less and less as time went on, but it lasted for a long time. A lot of fear. So I had a choice to make. And this is not a choice I made right away, obviously. I had to decide if I wanted to keep believing this thought belief, or if I wanted to choose another thought belief, another belief which would bring me different thoughts. Now, here's the thing. All those negative thoughts, all those judgmental thoughts that were in my mind, and they were there for me to choose. But all the other thoughts, the thoughts that come from God, the thoughts of love, of forgiveness, of peace, of happiness, of joy, all those are in my mind also. I get to choose. It's really very simple. We just choose. What are you going to believe? And what you choose to believe is going to affect everything. But all thoughts are there, just waiting for us to choose them. So for a long time, when I got to that point of choice, I couldn't bring myself to choose differently. It was like, I think it was kind of like my mind was saying I was harmful to my mother, to my brothers, to my children, to my ex-husband, to, everybody. I was harmful to them. They're suffering for it. Why should I be let off the hook? Why should I get away with it if they're still suffering? Now, how did I know they were suffering? Well, I don't know. I just did, because that was my belief. My belief is they were suffering, so that was what I was operating from. You can only operate from your belief. As Jesus says, what you believe is true for you. And that was very true for me. And that was how I saw it. Okay. So for a long time, I got to that point of choice. And Jesus says that the only power we've left ourselves here is choice, but it's enough. It's enough. But when I would get to that point of choice, I would go back into the old way of thinking. I would choose to keep believing that I was guilty. So then it would get to the action part. And as long as I was still believing that, I would have to act on what I was believing. So I believed that I had done terrible things, that I was very guilty for them, and that I was hated for it. And so what did I do? Well, I tried to make up for it. I over-mothered. Long after my kids are grown and on their own, I'm like buying them things, getting them out of trouble, doing whatever I can to make up for the errors that I made. I couldn't do much for my mother. She got Alzheimer's and then was in that for a very long time and then died. And so there wasn't much I could do there, but I could feel bad. That would be what I would give her. I would feel bad about it. Okay, so I would try to make up for it. I made an effort to avoid those who witnessed my sin. I didn't want to be around people who knew me when I was younger. I avoided thinking about it whenever possible. I would stuff the feelings down. Oh, I would do this little neat trick, this little spiritual bypass trick, where you go, oh, I forgive everything, and I'm the son of God, and I'm loved, and I'm okay. Yeah, so that now it's all over, right? No, it's not. Okay, so action. That's what I did. Self-punishment. Okay, a lot of self-punishment, sickness, things not going well in my life, making bad choices, being depressed. All these are just self-punishments. They're like, okay, God, I'm going to look how much I'm suffering. You don't have to punish me. I'm doing it to myself. Projection. After a while, the guilt would get to be too much, and I would start to find somebody else to carry some of the load. Like whenever I would think about I wasn't a very good mother, I would think, well, my mom was a very good mother either. I didn't have much of a role model here. So it was just like I would just keep looking for somebody else to be guilty. Like when my youngest son, he suffered a lot, a lot of stuff of his own doing, his own making, and I would just like dread to hear from him, because I was like, okay, what is the next disaster? It's like it's his fault, and then of course the guilt's compounded, because now I'm like rejecting my son because I feel bad. But that's what happens whenever we don't choose at that point of choice. When we stay from the ego perspective, then we just keep this going. And so now we got projection, and now the guilt was increased in me. And so more and more, I would have these memories come up just at the worst times, it was almost like I was just slammed by them. And when I would be, it was like I was doing it all over again. The same emotions would come up, the same upset would be there. It was like I could be sick to my stomach, or I could be crying because it would be so strong. That's because that feeling of guilt was increased. And so the belief in the guilt is increased. Now, because the belief in guilt is increased, there's fear came in. I was like, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to wake up. I'm never going to be free. I'm I'm like the only person that's not going to join God. Somehow I'm going to be left out. I don't know. Crazy thoughts, crazy thoughts. Just a lot of fear. And then, of course, what do we do when we feel fearful? We feel defensive. And then this is when that defense, that's when fear is driving. It was driving me to defend myself. And I would really start to think like I would have my kids over to eat with me or something. And I would imagine that they didn't like the food. They wished they could leave. They were in a hurry to go because they didn't want to be around me. You know, this is the way that that works. As long as we're holding on to all of that guilt and that fear, as long as we're believing our thoughts that created that feeling of being guilty, being sinful. And then of course, because I was feeling defensive, I would attack. I would attack those I imagined were attacking me. I got to tell you, this wasn't really good for our relationship. My kids were fantastic because they hung in there and they never actually said or did any of the things that I imagined was going through their heads. I told my daughter one time, my oldest girl, she had a problem with drugs. And at one point, she doesn't anymore, but at one point she did. And I told her one time, because she was being so nice to me. And I said, I've never met anybody who can forgive like you do. You forgive so well, so completely. And she said, well, for me, it was a matter of life or death. And of course, she meant by that if she goes back to blaming everybody, then she's going to go back to using. And I thought, you know what? That's true. It's a matter of life or death to me too, to all of us, because it's our guilt and our fear that drives us into death, and then back here again, and then back into death. And so when she said those words, I bet she doesn't even remember it, but that just made all the difference to me, and things began to change at that point. So I had all this proof now in my mind. And then let me remind you, it was all in my mind. I never had one child who said, Mom, you were a terrible mother, or I resent you, or I wish you had, whatever. Never. It was all in my mind. I don't know what was in their mind. I have no idea, but I know that all of this was in my mind. It was certainly never voiced. But because I had all this proof from all this past behavior and imagined attacks and this defense and all of that, it just made the most awful mess in my mind. And it prevented me from moving forward. It prevented me from going forward in the way that I wanted to. So I had to break that cycle. And so that occurred that night when I'm laying there in bed, and all of a sudden, a lot of these thoughts, a lot of these imagined problems, memories had been undone one at a time, letting them go. But there were still a couple that I thought of as really especially bad. And I'm laying there in bed, and I have a memory of one, and then a memory of another. And I'm like, I was so happy. I've been doing so well. I had such a great day. And all of a sudden, here are these thoughts out of nowhere. What is this about? And I said, Jesus, I don't want to do this anymore. I am done with this. I am done. What do I have to do? What needs to happen? Well, interestingly enough, the thought that came very clearly in my mind, not a voice, but man, very loud thought, was for me to call or get in touch with Kate Greaves, which some of you may know. Kate awakened, oh gosh, about 7 years ago, maybe something like that. And she did it through A Course in Miracles. And Kate told me, when I did, I said, Kate, I said, you've gone through all the stuff that I'm going through. I said, how did you let go of that guilt? And so she said, she talked to me about it. And she said, first of all, she reminded me that the guilt is not real, which I knew that as a concept, but I obviously wasn't feeling it. And she said, and you know that you're fine. You've been untouched by any of this. And I'm like, yeah, I know that, but I still have all these memories that keep coming up. And she says, but you trust Jesus. And so if you ask Jesus to take this from you, he will. And she said the way that she did it is that she saw herself sitting on a bench and she saw Jesus sitting beside her. And she said, Jesus, I've got this darkness. It's like this black hole in me where all these dark thoughts are and all this guilt is. And she asked him to get rid of it. And she said that it was like he reached inside and brought his hands together around that darkness until his hands were touching. And she said it was gone. It was just gone. And I said, I can do this because I do trust Jesus. I love Jesus. He's my brother. He loves me. He wants me to be free. He will do this for me. And I knew it in my heart. And that's what made the difference, you see. It's because I shifted from this concept that I understood and this conflicted desire. I want to be free, but I want to hold on to my guilt. I shifted from that because I believed that Jesus would help me. And that he would do this because that's why he's here. And so I said, and I didn't use the same process that Kate did. I just said, okay, Jesus, I'm ready. I want to be healed. I'm tired of this. And that's what happened. It was just gone. And so I remember the next night as I'm laying in bed, I'm thinking, is it really gone? Because I've given stuff away before, but it's come back, for me to look at again. I mean, it would be lessened, but it would still come back. And so is it gone? And all of a sudden I had a memory again of something that happened in the past. And I went, oh, shoot, there it is. But then I realized, it was like it had no energy, no power. It was like watching black and white picture. It was just nothing. It did not cause me any distress. It was gone. And then later, I was doing some kind of process with somebody, and part of the process was to ask for to forgive something, and so I brought up this idea. I mean, it's the only thing I could think of. It's the only big major place in my life I had failed to forgive up until this time. And so I just brought up about memories with my kids, my mother, whatever. And I heard very clearly in my mind, that's done. And I just never thought about it again. It was very important to me because I think that when I let go of this chunk of guilt, that there was enough light in my mind at that point that I was able to experience a shift, which brought me to a place of just a more sustained sense of peace and happiness than I'd ever experienced before. But even more than that, I went from thinking, okay, so here's how it is. We're not bodies. I'm not a body. I'm still as God created me. I'm not even in a body. Jesus says we're not even in these bodies. He says that like 4 times in the Course, that this is just an ancient memory that we've placed before our eyes. I went from thinking those things to knowing those things. That's what this shift felt like. Not to say that I don't feel like a body, especially if I have a headache. It's like that ego mind, that split mind is still like grasping for some kind of hold, it's like, oh yeah, you are. What's that headache, but I don't take it seriously. Yesterday, I don't know if I slept wrong or what, but I had this pain in my neck and it was like really bothering me. And I thought I should go take an ibuprofen and give myself a break here. But I didn't make it to the medicine cabinet. I got busy doing other things. And then I noticed it again. And I said, I'm gonna go take that ibuprofen, but I would never make it. I did that like 4 times, but I never made it to the ibuprofen. I think slowly this is starting to shift a little, in that I am more willing to let go of these beliefs, like the belief in sickness, the belief in pain. What does he tell us about pain? I mean, look at lesson 190. He says, there is no pain. I can't remember the exact quote. I thought I might have it written down, but there is no pain. If pain is real, God is not. So I know that there isn't any. There's the body, these bodies feel pain. And it's, as long as we're identified strongly with the body, then when the body feels pain, we'll feel pain. I don't worry about that. The fact that I can still feel pain, that's probably going to go on. Who knows? Maybe the rest of my life, hopefully not into another life, but who knows? Whatever it is, it is. But I know that it's not real. I know that I am feeling pain only because I'm still a little too much identified with this body. Because he says that if you, how does he put it? If you believe that you're a body, you're going to experience everything the body experiences. So the more that we can detach from this idea that I am this body, and we are not. We are absolutely not these bodies. And as we begin to detach from that, well, then we will have less experience of the body. In other words, we don't experience what the body's experiencing. That is not complete for me, and I can't go too much further. I don't like to talk about things I haven't done yet, but I have had some experience with that. I think what happens is I've got to have some motivation in that direction for me to really step into that knowing from a place of pain. But I have done it. And so I know that it can be done. I just don't do it consistently yet. Okay, so how did I break that cycle? Well, from my thoughts and my feelings, I recognized the belief that was driving it. So all these feelings of I'm not, I made all these mistakes, I'm guilty for them, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff, where did it come from? It came from the belief in guilt. If I didn't believe in guilt, none of that would have occurred. And I know that's true because now that I don't have that strong belief in guilt anymore, in fact, it hardly ever comes up. The things that I would have felt guilty for, I don't. I just go, oh, okay, I made that mistake. All right, let's not do that again. And I'm done with it. Or when I'm looking at somebody else and I have a feeling like, oh, can't believe they did that. And then I'll just laugh at myself because it's ridiculous. It's just a belief in guilt. I'm not interested in that belief in guilt anymore. And if the guilt tries to, if like tries to suck me into the story again, I know how to pull myself out of it because I have the belief in guilt I also have this thought, this other belief, guilt is not real. And Jesus tells us that over and over, guilt is not real. We made that up. It's just a concept. It's just an idea. And we made it up. And so we do not have to choose it. We can choose that we're innocent. That thought is in the mind as well. I'm innocent. They're innocent. Everyone's innocent. So I have to recognize the belief that's behind whatever is going on, whatever thought, whatever feeling. I have to ask for clarity. Help me to understand this. Like when I was talking to Jesus, help me to understand, what do you want me to know about this? What do I have to do to let this go? Ask for clarity. Sometimes I'll use a self-inquiry, if that's helpful. There's a lot of self-inquiry processes I like, Regina's. You basically are just asking yourself, why do I feel like this? Why am I thinking this? Why is that happening? Why am I feeling it? Why am I feeling that? I just keep doing it until I get down to the root cause. And then I'll know what it is. I'll know what that belief is that needs to be healed. When it seems I cannot let go of fear, then there is some underlying belief that needs attention. If I can't let go of guilt, there's some underlying belief that needs attention. If I can't let go of lack, there's some underlying belief that needs attention. So in other words, I'm just going to, let's say that there's this fear, like, oops, I don't have enough money this month. I'm not going to be able to pay all my bills. What am I going to do? Where did those thoughts come from? They came from the belief in lack. And so that's the belief I want to change. So in my mind, there's a belief in lack. And in my mind, there's a belief in abundance. I choose. Which one do I want to believe? Which one is going to bring me happiness? Which one is going to bring me a peace of mind? And which one is going to bring me closer to awakening to God? So that's and I know that when I notice a belief that is not bringing me toward the peace of God, then that belief's not relevant to me anymore. There's no point in me choosing it. It's not giving me what I want. So when that happens, when I notice these things, what I have to do is I have to continue to direct my mind to the truth. There's a place in the Course where Jesus says that. He says, he tells it, in fact, more than one place where he says, direct your mind. Direct your mind. He also tells us in one of the lessons, your mind is your servant. It must do what you direct it to do. I forget which lesson that is. And so my mind is a good servant. It will eventually shift. I have to remember that I have been directing it toward guilt for many, many, many years. Not just in this lifetime, many years. And so I can't, if I don't just automatically shift from guilt to innocence, no big deal. I just need to direct my mind. I keep directing my mind where I want it to go. And what will happen is it will suddenly start, oh, okay, innocence. And then innocence comes up more often than guilt does. Eventually, guilt just sort of drops away. So I decide if a belief is serving me. If it's not, I change my mind about what I believe. And how can I do that? It's through the power of God in me. I'm not doing this from my ego. Your ego can't do that. Your ego doesn't want to do that. Your ego's not interested in innocence. Your ego's interested in guilt and fear and anger and hatred and gossip and pain and suffering and anything but innocence, anything but peace. It loves the drama, loves the drama. not interested in peace, not interested in innocence. So from the ego perspective, we cannot do this, but from the perspective of our holiness, we can absolutely do this. Our holiness can do anything. And that's not your ego. That is from yourself. So it's a strength of God in us that gives us a power to make these changes. Now we've got something we can depend on, because he also tells us if you're depending on your own ego thinking, then you have every right to be discouraged, because it's not going to get you where you want to go. But but if you're depending on the strength of God in you as your power, then you can depend on that. It's very dependable. So and then I practice this until the mind accepts a new instruction. Now, I practiced and practiced and practiced moving up to that shift, the one I was talking about, where I let go of all that guilt. I did the practice until my mind was like, reached this point where it was saying, I can't do this anymore. I want free. Because in the end, it's going to be your desire that gets you there. And as your desire for freedom gets stronger, then your desire to hold on to the past and hold on to the guilt and the fear, when your desire gets stronger than that, well, then it's automatic. Your mind is very powerful. And then in fact, he says several things. Well, he says a lot of things, of course, but one that I like a lot is faith goes to what you want, and you instruct your mind accordingly. So for many years, I put my faith in my guilt, which is crazy, right? I mean, what was I thinking? But I did. And hey, I got just what I asked for. And I instructed my mind, be guilty for this, be guilty for that. And the thing is, if you've got guilt, and you've got the belief in guilt in your mind, then you're going to see guilt everywhere. You're going to see it in everybody, because it's like a filter that all your thinking goes through. So you can't like take guilt and put it into a box and say, I'm only going to be guilty for this, and only this person is guilty and no one else. You can't do that. Guilt is like a filter, and everything passes through it. So to be free, we have to give up the belief in guilt. Would God have created guilt? If he did, he's just as insane as we are. God did not. God's not insane. He did not create guilt. It does not exist, except as a belief in the mind. And we get a choice about what we believe. And then the next thing is, I wanted to be very careful. I do not reject or project responsibility. Never project responsibility. I have a choice about that too. I choose to be responsible for everything, because only from that place of responsibility can I do anything about it. And there's no reason to be afraid of the ego. And I hear people say that a lot. Like, oh, my ego's so strong. No, your ego's not strong. Your belief in your ego is strong, because you just keep giving it energy. You keep feeding it. So you don't have to be afraid of your ego. It depends on your mind. And as you made it by believing in it, so you can dispel it by withdrawing belief from it. Do not project the responsibility for your belief in it onto anyone else, or you will preserve the belief. That's in chapter 7, section 8. That's the problem, you see, with projecting guilt. Besides the fact that we're making ourselves separate, but we're also reinforcing the belief in guilt. If you look at somebody and think they're guilty, And, we don't generally say, oh, that person's guilty. What we say is, oh, he shouldn't have done that. Or I can't believe he did that. Or look what he did to me. Look how pathetic I am now since I've known this guy. Guilt, it shows up in all sorts of ridiculous ways. So recognize the power of your mind. The mind is, Jesus says in chapter 2, early on, the mind is very powerful and never loses its creative force. It never sleeps. Every instant it is creating. It is hard to recognize that thought and belief combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains. This is why we don't have to be afraid of our thoughts. Because one of the things that we can easily fall into as course students, because we watch our thoughts and we recognize that thoughts have power. And so we want to be careful about our thoughts. And so then we can become afraid of our thoughts. But we don't need to be. So let's say that, my son texted me and he says, I need to talk. Are you available? And maybe my first thought is, oh crap, what's happened now? Because that's usually when I get a call. He's out of money. He needs to borrow money. Something happened with his girlfriend and now his heart's broken. I mean, I can come up with all kinds of scenarios in my mind. A lot of negative stuff there. My son's not okay. Bad things are about to happen. A lot of negative stuff there. Well, those thoughts, if I combine them with belief, will have power. But what if instead I just said, oh, I see those thoughts. Those are thoughts from the past. That's just an old habit. I don't believe that anymore. I don't know what is going on with him. And I don't know what my part in it is. Let's find out. It's a total shift in the way that I'm thinking. So that by the time I get onto the phone with him, I read somebody did this explanation and I read it and I thought, this is so good. But by the time I get onto the phone with him, now my belief has shifted into my son is okay. My son is strong. My son is just living his life, learning his lessons. I'm happy that I'm part of it. So see, it's a whole different shift. It's the belief which gives thought power. Now, if I'm just doing the spiritual bypass and I'm just saying, oh, can't believe that, I'm scared of my thoughts. And I'm like, that's not right. That's not right. It's still going to be negative. But if it's an honest shift, then it's the positive, which will move that mountain. I think it's a good thing for us to remember that with every thought, he tells us, he tells us there are no idle thoughts first. All thoughts produce form at some level.
That's it.
So we have to be aware of that. And that's why we watch our thoughts. That's why I have for the last, 30 years, I've been very, very aware of my thoughts. So that if I notice that these thoughts are coming from the perspective of the ego, I can shift that. I can change that and move into a true thought, a positive thought. Those thoughts are there for me. I have a choice about that. But to realize that there aren't any idle thoughts. And every thought that we have contributes either to truth or illusion. One or the other. There aren't any middle ground. There's no middle ground. There's no thought that doesn't have that effect. It's either going to make the illusion stronger or the truth stronger in our minds. It doesn't affect truth, but it makes it stronger in our minds. And every thought we have brings either war or peace, either love or fear. He tells us a neutral result is impossible because a neutral thought is impossible. So that's a big responsibility we have. but we know what to do with it. And because it's a responsibility and because we have that choice, we are all the time bringing ourselves closer and closer to awakening, closer to God, and bringing everyone with us because our thoughts affect the whole. And we have that choice. So, you know what? I think what I'd like to do is just stop here for a moment and let's just see if anybody has any questions or anything they would like to share
Okay.
about their process.
Yes, that sounds like a great idea. Myron and everybody, would you like to take maybe like a 2-minute break? We speaking now for an hour, so just a few minutes, right? Just if anybody needs
Yeah.
to get a glass of water, use the washroom, whatever. 2 or 3 minute break.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Hello, welcome back, everybody. Myron, we have a question here on the chat. Would you like for me to go ahead and read it?
Yeah, please.
Okay, it's from Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. She says, hello, everyone. I'm going through a divorce of my choosing. My husband still lives with me and we are friends. I no longer love him as a wife. He worked away for 2 years, and when he came back, I knew I didn't feel the same way for him. I had been doing the course while he was away. I feel some guilt having him leave. I would love some guidance with this.
Oh, well, love is always the answer. And so it's always some form of love. For myself, I always ask for guidance. Now, I've been divorced 3 times. I have married 3 times, divorced 3 times. With my last husband, I was very happy to be divorced. It was the thing for me to do. It was the right thing for me to do. But I still had to heal that relationship. You don't get away from that. You don't get away. The relationship isn't over because the person is not there, or because we don't feel the same. So my recommendation is just to keep working in your own mind. Watch your thoughts for the guilt and forgive the guilt. It isn't real. You don't need it. It's not helpful. Watch your thoughts about your husband, your thoughts about yourself. Just look for the thoughts that are coming from the ego mind and forgive them. And that's what I did with my husband. And there was a lot of water under that bridge, so to speak. And so there was a lot of opportunity there for forgiveness. And I reached the point, and we worked together. So there was no getting away from him. But I just kept working with the frustration, the anger, the guilt, either for myself or for him. Any of those thoughts in my mind that came up about that relationship until it was completely healed. And now we're friends. I saw him yesterday. He came to the funeral as well. And we chatted for a little while, just as friends will do. When he got married, he invited me to his wedding. I mean, the relationship is completely healed. That's the goal, as far as I'm concerned, is the healing of the relationship, whether I'm with the person or not.
Very good.
And I'd just like to say that can even go for somebody that has already made their transition. It doesn't matter whether they're here or not. It's that same process takes place, because there is no break in communication. It's always there.
Right.
Yes, and the relationship itself is in the mind.
Right.
So you can't really get away from a relationship. You can heal it or suffer from it or bury it, and which you'll just suffer later. But it's always there. It's in the mind.
Now, just while we're on that subject, just I want everybody to understand that the mind that we're talking about here is outside of time and space. That mind is not in the body. And that's an aspect that you really have to understand, that you are that mind, and that mind has the power of God behind it to create or miscreate. And that's why Myron said, it has the power to move mountains. I remember Jesus said one time, yeah, you could move mountains, but where are you going to put them?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So does anyone else have any questions or any thoughts that they'd like to share?
So guys, feel free to put, Lope, is that you putting your hand up, wagging around there a little bit? Feel free to unmute yourself if it is you, Lope.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I don't have a question. I want to thank Myron because I truly see the work that she has done. She has told my story. I can so relate, and I want to thank her because it is a choice between believing in guilt or innocence. And I can see that her mind is holy now, and she's bringing light to everyone because we are the mind of Christ, which is very holy and powerful. And I am so grateful that that I tuned in. I had gone to visit my granddaughter in Portland, and what I saw scared me, and I didn't realize it. This morning I wasn't even feeling very good. I wanted to just I don't know. I don't know where I was at, but of course the Holy Spirit, because I am connected, said, you are going to listen to the guest speaker. And Stephanie said, everybody knows Myron. And I go, no, I've never heard of her. I've never even seen you. But your story is exactly like mine. I have 2 kids and they're always calling and I'm dreading it, but then I turn it over. It's funny. Anyway, I want to thank you so much because you got me out of that belief in what I saw with my granddaughter. No, she is the Christ, and I have to see the innocence. And I want to thank you for the reminder. You are a very powerful, powerful course teacher. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, everybody's a teacher. We're always either teaching for God or teaching for ego.
Yes.
So I just try to direct it more toward God as much as I can. But I can only do that as I heal my own mind, because what you are always shows up. You know, you can't really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, that's just going to happen. But it's come from just very consistent. What I have achieved has come from very consistent watching of my mind and making decisions based on that. And I will say, you know, I was telling this story. Now this happened with my children slowly over a number of years. But 2019 was whenever that complete healing occurred. But we are very, very close now. And it's so the relationship just got stronger and stronger once I quit being so needy.
Right.
You know, I kept needing them to forgive me, needing them to love me, needing them to want me. You know, it's just all this need. That's a lot of stress to put on a relationship. And when all of that was gone, that relationship really improved. So I'm seeing Winnie.
Yes.
You had your hand up.
Yes, Winnie, feel free to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, hi, Myron.
Hey.
I would like if you have some kind of advice. I have been going through the last 2 years very serious anxiety, and it seems now that I have come to a place where most of it is gone. Like it was an early childhood abuse and stuff like that I had to forgive. But now I can feel that I'm so sensitive to fear that I'm really like, oh, now I'm finally getting some peace here. So when I read something in the course or something happens that, you know, if I'm trying to meditate and I go too deep and I feel the body's kind of disappear, then there's some fear still in the mind. So I just wonder if you have any experience to how to approach that, so I don't just fly away again, because now I'm finally finding some peace, and that is really challenging for me to, you know, just a subtle feeling of fear. I'm like, oh my goodness, here we go again.
Yeah, I know. You know, all of our past experience has been that there's nothing here that we can depend on. Everything shifts and changes all the time. So that becomes our expectation. And I know exactly what you mean by that feeling, though. because I've had it for most of my life. And even after the shift that I experienced, where I was feeling peace pretty much all the time, anytime that for a while there, anytime any kind of difference, like I would have a worried thought or whatever, something would come into my mind, I would like, oh no, it's gonna go, then what do? I can't go back to that. But what I can tell you, Winnie, is that you just keep doing the work that you're doing. It starts to stabilize. And then you can be and place your faith not in your past learning, but in Jesus, in the Holy Spirit. Place your faith there, because that's where your strength is. Because within you, there's power you can't imagine, but that's within your real self, not within your ego self, not within your body, but within yourself. You can trust that. And don't be afraid of the thoughts. The thoughts come, the thoughts go. They come, let them come. See the thought, watch it leave. We don't really have to fear those thoughts, because now you know that you are drawing on the strength of God. And
It's
so
more like it seems like the emotions, this subtle feeling of just, oh, it comes before. I found it difficult to find a thought. I mean, I'm looking, what thought did actually bring that fear up? And I don't know, because I can just wake up and it's there, just very subtle, but it's like, oh, like less and less tolerance for this awkward feeling. But
yeah,
I'm difficult to find the thought, I think.
yeah. And Jesus says he teaches through contrast. And so what a wonderful contrast you have there. You've had this life of anxiety, and now you've seen what it's like to be at peace, and to remember as well as you can that thought of peace, that belief in peace is available to you. So when the ego mind wants to drift back to the old way of, I'm going to believe in anxiety, to remind yourself, wait, there is a belief in peace. I choose that. And give it as much conviction as you can.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
I ask you, Jesus, I ask for help.
Yeah.
It's like, here I am, I'm doing the best I can. Some of this is very hard for me. Help me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a line in the course that says, to have peace, teach peace.
Yes.
That's how we get it.
Yeah, but I don't really know what that means, actually.
Well, you have to demonstrate it in yourself. You have to become peaceful. That's how you keep it.
Yeah, I get that, but when that upset is kind of coming, I mean, I can't teach peace then.
Well, that's when
So it's a bit, not really.
maybe that's when we want to lean on Jesus, on the Holy Spirit, as we gain strength, because as we practice peace, to do that for the moment, let that be where you're working. And then your life, as your life shifts into a more peaceful state, then you will be teaching peace.
Okay.
And when you fall back into anxiety, oh, wait, I have a choice. I'm going to choose to believe in peace. Now you're teaching peace again.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's like innocence.
Yeah.
If we choose to be innocent, we also have to choose to see it everywhere. That's the way that we keep it for ourselves, because we can't have innocence to ourselves. We have to see it everywhere. In other words, what we want to keep, we have to give away. And giving is receiving. It's just back and forth.
Yeah, like also he says that the reality, it's only reality if it's shared, which I thought was a really good point too, that Jesus made in the Course. So if I have a thought that I think is mine, as my thought, and the moment I say my thought, I've taken it out of the realm of the eternal, and I brought it into the illusion. So now it's an ego thought, it's a private thought. What he calls a private thought. It's an illusion, it's no longer in the realm of reality. So, because I can't share my thought. How can I share my thought? I can give it words to the best of my ability, but it's your understanding of my words that matter to you, so it's not really, I guess we really don't ever share our thinking, our ego thinking, because everybody's is different. But when we start sharing our love, sharing our peace, sharing kindness, those things which come from God, well, then we're actually joining at that point, because that we can share.
Beautiful.
Very good. And Winnie, it could also be that you are just approaching what the Course in Miracles calls the outside ring of fear, where there's abstract fear that comes up for no reason. Because I did hear you allude to that. It's abstract fear, it's not necessarily specific. The Course says that fear is always related to specifics, but when you're going through what we call the eye of the needle, it's not necessarily specific. It's just an overwhelming, all-consuming fear. And there's sometimes that the Holy Spirit will not feel available to you during that time. And this is when we have to have faith, and we have to go deeper. Like Muji said, when the ego is coming for you, and you're overwhelmed, and you just have to, that's the time to just stay where you are. Don't go anywhere. Don't look for anything. Just simply be and trust that you are being supported, and that there is something that's going to get you through this. And I've been through this, and Lloyd has been through this, and there are others on this call right now that have been through this. And not everybody that's waking up in this lifetime have necessarily gone through this or will, because maybe they've gone through it in another lifetime. And none of that even really matters. But the point is, if you're going through it, it's just about trusting that you will get through it, and all is well. It's not because something has gone wrong. It's actually because something is going right. You're doing all the right things. You've reached a level where the ego is going ballistic. There's more I could say about that, but I just wanted to insert that.
Yeah, it's like Jesus says, that the ego, as we get closer and closer to truth, the ego goes from being suspicious to vicious.
Right.
And I know I've had that experience, that like, for instance, when I was younger, as I said, I had a lot of depression, and there were times when I was suicidal, not to the point of actually doing it, but that was like my get out of jail card, my get out of hell free card, as I kept something available so that I could take my life if it just got too bad. And so that went away through a study of the Course. I remember the day that I woke up in bed, and I'm laying there in bed, and I'm thinking, I didn't have the thought, I wonder if this is going to be a good day. And then I thought, oh, I can't remember the last time I was depressed. I remember exactly where I was and when it happened, so that went away. And then one time, I don't remember when this was. I think it was sometime around right before the shift. And I was just minding my own business in my bedroom, combing my hair or something. And I had the thought, very loud thought. You know how some thoughts just feel loud, very loud thought, you should just kill yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? It was just like shocking. It was scary, really. I mean, because it was in my own mind. Where did my mind, what was that all about? I was perfectly happy. And then there was just that, and the next, and then it happened again. Maybe I'm thinking maybe about around 3 times or something. But after the first time, it didn't scare me because I knew that's just the ego mind. The ego would like to kill you before you can wake up.
Right.
And so it gets very desperate whenever you're close.
Right. Yeah. And I think
But
that's,
The ego wants you dead, but not itself. That's what it says.
yeah. The ego's insane.
so you're not alone, Winnie. And that's great. Yeah, thumbs up to you too, because when I was going through it, I felt so isolated, although I was surrounded. I mean, there were people that I could help that helped me through that, but there were few and far between because it was only those who understood. It was only those that had gone through it that could truly understand.
Yeah, Stephanie, when you were going through that, I didn't really get it because what happened for me, it was very slow, gradual, over a long period of time.
Right.
Some people just kind of jump into it,
Yeah.
you're like dive into it.
Right.
I was always like, no, Holy Spirit, we're going a little too fast here. Let's slow down.
Right.
But when I thought back on it, I said, okay, I get it. Because like one time I remember coming home, I used to work as an outside sales, and I worked all across the state. So I would travel all over the state every week. And then like I would get home maybe Thursday or Friday, and it would be usually late at night. At the time I was living at my daughter's house. It was after one of the hurricanes, and I was living at my daughter's house. And so I drove up to my house, and it's dark, 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 because she lived right on the edge of town, but right outside it, so we didn't have street lights. And their house was completely dark, and I'm thinking, oh, they must have gone somewhere. And so I started to get out of the car, and all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed with fear. It's like, what if there's somebody in the house? And I sat there just frozen in fear. And then I thought, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to call the police and say, somebody come walk with me into the house? No, I'm not going to do that. So I got out of the car and I went into the house and I started looking. And she had a really big house. So I'm looking at every room, every closet, under the bed. I'm like the one that in the scary show where you're saying, don't do that, don't go there, don't go there. But I was doing it anyway. And I walked all through the house and there's nobody there. And then I thought, well, somebody could have come in behind me. And now they're in that part of the house. And I talked myself into so much fear that this is so insane. And I wouldn't tell you except it's hilarious. I went into the kitchen. They had this big, what do you call them, French doors, or the glass, big, huge glass doors. There's no way you can make those secure. So what I did was I put chairs and canned goods and pots and pans and everything. I guess I thought, if I'm going to die, I want to know it's coming. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, so I'm done that. Now I'm in the bedroom and I'm laying in it. And by this time, I have talked myself into such intense fear. I am laying there literally just paralyzed. with fear. And this is going on now for hours. And the whole time I'm saying, okay, I know I'm crazy. I know this is crazy. You know, Holy Spirit, you know, help me with this. Like, I want to let go of this fear. You know, I'm talking to Holy Spirit the whole time, but it's a split mind. It's that conflict. You know, we have to heal all conflict, he says, all conflict for all time. But my mind is very conflicted here. Part of it is like, I'm using the course because I always use the course. The other part of it was believing in the fear. And so I'm just laying there, and I remembered in the Way of Mastery, there's this prayer where you call on the angels to come and protect you, and the legions of helpers. I think he calls it the legions of helpers, the angels and legions of helpers. And it's a beautiful little prayer. And I said the prayer over and over and over until I fell asleep. And then when I woke up, I was like mortified, you know. And so I'm like quickly going to the house, putting everything back into order. I don't want anyone to know how nuts I was that night. And none of it made any sense. But you know what? It was the last time that happened. So that was good. Not to say I never had fear again, but that was the last time I fell into that well of fear.
Right.
And I think that the difference was that I continued to ask. I continued to turn to the Holy Spirit, to Jesus, and to asking to see clearly, and to forgive those ideas. So the only thing that happened that night was that I chose to believe fear. It's the only thing that happened. There was nobody in the house. There was no danger. I just chose, there was this belief in fear and this belief in safety. And I said, well, I think I'm going to believe in fear tonight.
Yes.
It's sometimes there's like this, what we call an abstract fear,
Yes.
and there's no reason for it. You wake up in the middle of the night and it's something that's sort of indescribable. You're in absolute terror for absolutely no reason. And it's just the ego projecting onto the body because it realizes it's being annihilated.
Right.
So there's a line in the Course that says the ego uses the body to conspire against your mind.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that can show up. And that's when you need to really trust, because you will get through it. It's just part of the procedure.
So is there anyone else who has any questions or anything they'd like to share?
I'd like to just say thank you, Myron, and I love you so much. And yeah, I was thinking about everything you said. Oh my God, it's been like, and I don't know what's going on, and that's okay. I don't need to know. I'll just hand it to the Holy Spirit, and Jesus will show me what I said. I can't remember all this, Jesus. He said, it's not for you to remember. It's what's going on, and you don't really have any idea, and you don't need to know. You just keep talking to me and keep healing, and just, you don't know your advances from your retreat. I don't know how many times he has to tell me that I have no idea what's going on. And he was speaking to me when you guys were talking about fear, because, you know, he said it was specific, and he said, no, it's never actually specific. He said the ego assigns specificity to it to make you think you fix that particular form, it'll go away. But once you really start getting into it, like Lloyd was saying, it will seem abstract because you're really, this is what he's telling me, you're really going deeper with me. So it's just going to start coming up. You're going to, I don't know, I guess we start realizing you can't fix it in form. I don't know, because I still have that feeling of form. And if I do that, but I know deep down it's not true. I know it's just fear coming up, survival of seeming of bodies and those kind of things coming up. But in truth, fear is abstract. It's the fear of God or punishment or guilt, those things that you were just talking about, all of it, that it's not real. And to really go deeper and to trust Jesus, because I love Jesus now. He really is my friend and my brother. And just to go deeper and realize with him that it's not real, like to really have the feeling. I keep practicing it, but to really start, like you said, not just here, but to actually begin feeling it. And I can't make that happen. I just have to keep trusting. That's how it happens. And he'll show me that that there's only innocence and that guilt isn't real. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I love you, Myron, very much.
Love you too, Kelly. You know, yeah, so there's something you said and I was gonna share about it, but now I can't remember what it is. So that's okay. It'll come back later. I think that our lives, you know, our stories, they're not true stories. They're all made up. They're all made up at the same moment. They all exist within the same, I don't even want to say time frame because time isn't even real, but they all exist as memories in our minds. And but they're important. I love when someone tells me their story. I feel very honored when people tell me their story, because our stories are what we came for, so that we could see what it is that still needs to be healed in our mind. And so my story just shows me all the time what it is I haven't healed yet. And so I pay very close attention to my story, not because it's true, not because it's me, not because it's important, but because it's showing me what needs to be healed in my mind. And then I can do that. Or even if I see it in someone else's mind, if it's something I never believed, but I see someone else believes it, that's okay. Jesus says it doesn't matter where in the sonship something is healed. So if I see it, if I'm aware of it, well, then let me heal it. Let me forgive it.
See, something we have a tough time understanding, of course, because the brain itself can't really understand it, is the fact that all our lives and all of these stories that we're seeing all happened at the same time. And that's why the Course says we're simply mentally reviewing that which has gone by. We're looking at all our stories and seeing what needs healing. And that's what Myron is saying there. That's what we're here. Forgiveness is our only function.
Yeah, it's so tempting for us to think that we are this character, you know, so like, excuse me, this character Myron with all of her flaws and all of her good stuff and whatever, you know, like whatever I like about her, whatever I don't like about her. When I'm done with this character, I will exist as I've always existed, but that I will not exist as Myron. You read stories about people who have very clear memories of their past lives or other lives, I like to call them. This is don't know how it comes, you know, time's not linear, but in one of their other lives, there's a very interesting story of a young boy who lived near me, who had distinct, very clear memories of an earlier life. In fact, so much so that as he got old enough to speak and to share these memories, he told his family who his other family was. And literally he went and met the sister from his other life. She's an old lady now, but he shared their stories together and she recognized all the stories. And I mean, there was very, very clear. So in that past life, he was a pilot in the war, and he was that person with that history and all the things about himself. In this lifetime, he is this young guy, not forget his name, and he has this life, and he's, living this life with all these different ideas and thoughts and who he is. So he can't be both of those, can he? Because he's neither of them.
Right.
So we're, don't get all attached to your personality. You're not going to get to keep it.
One way,
It's not you.
one way we experience, and most of us have experienced things, what we call deja vu. And deja vu is just simply, somebody says, my God, I think I've been here before. Some people even describe the exact room they've entered. They know where everything is. And that's really showing you, you have been there before. It's that simple.
Yeah. Or maybe maybe the veil is kind of thin
Yeah.
and we're seeing something from, Jesus says in the manual for teachers, or is it in the, somewhere along in there, where he's talking about psychic abilities, and he's saying that how all of their abilities are useful if they're given to the Holy Spirit. And he's saying that, there's nothing unusual about this. There aren't any unusual abilities.
Yeah.
That we just close ourselves off.
Yeah.
It's like we live in this little box. And my son, I laugh at my son because he doesn't believe almost anything that I believe. And sometimes I just say, you live such a narrow life, because you only believe what you can see. But it's true.
Loopy has her hand raised.
Loopy.
Yes, I'm glad Myron said that she couldn't relate to the Ring of Fire. At first I couldn't, and I had to go back and remember that one of the things that was so, I don't know what the word is, but the Course says that the bottom fear is we are afraid of God.
Yes.
And I never could believe it because I love God. I know God is love, but the Course definitely says that our ultimate fear is the fear of God, because we think we've usurped his power. And so we're afraid he's going to punish us for doing that. And so I do remember now that when I came to terms with what I thought I had done, I did have like the fear that I've never experienced before. And the way I got through the fear of God punishing me was, again, I felt the love. And I'm going to start crying because I remember how it felt. I said, Loopy, you're feeling the love of God. If your little love of God, if you're feeling that love, how much more love do you think God has for his only begotten son? And he made this dream so that you could experience all of this and to return with empty, loving, innocent love, the divine love that it has always been and will never cease. And so I got through the fear of God punishing me. And thank you, Stephanie, for helping those people. But it's, Myron, I'm the same age as you are, and I've studied the Course for so long. We forget these like steps we go through until someone mentions something and it triggers the memory. And yeah, it's a process. It definitely is. Every day, like you wash the dishes, you have to wash the guilt, because the ego is vicious and it's non-ending. It will make you believe in things that aren't true. Thank you.
So very true. You're so right. And that's that idea of the thoughts in the mind, all of a sudden you notice all these guilt thoughts or fear thoughts or anger thoughts or anything like that. Is like, the thoughts don't go away. my experience has been, and that I now have less thoughts than I used to. And the only reason I know that is because every once in a while I'll think, good Lord, my mind is just like going crazy. I'm having all this chatter, which means that I wasn't having the chatter before, because I just suddenly noticed it and I'm like, whoo, I don't want that. And then things quiet down a bit. So I have less chatter, but the thoughts, still come in. That's meaningless unless you're interested.
Right.
If you're interested in that thought, you will pull that toward you. In other words, it'll be in your, it's like you are just pure awareness, but you direct your awareness to what you're interested in. And we all know we can do that. We do it all the time. I'm interested in looking at you guys. I'm interested in listening to you. I'm interested in this. But there's all sorts of stuff going on around me. And if something catches my eye out the window, then my awareness shifts. And so now I'm interested in that. And then I'm interested in this again. That's the only thing that's happening, is we're shifting our awareness. And so it's the same thing, with our thoughts. A thought comes in, I notice it. I have a thought that, I don't know, my neighbor I just happened to be looking out my window and I saw my neighbor bring his trash can in and then go get my trash can and bring it up. And I thought, oh, that's so sweet. That was just an awareness, it's just where I chose to place my awareness. So the thoughts are the same way. So I can have a thought about, I don't know, some being angry with someone, maybe something I saw on the news. I don't know why I always say that. I always say I was angry with someone. I'm never angry. I don't know why that word keeps coming in, but something, maybe some judgment. So I'm judging something I saw on the news and I see that judgmental thought and I see it and it just goes away because I'm not interested in it. Some other thought, like one of my children, like I'm concerned about one of my children, well, maybe I stay interested in that. And I think about it, I'm holding it. It's like, here's a thought that was passing through and I went, whoa, let's look at that. Let's look at that a while. You see, so now that thought is one that I need to decide. This is I'm at that point of choice. How am I going to, from what perspective am I going to look at that thought? From the ego perspective or from the Holy Spirit's perspective? So I get to see which one comes up. And if the ego perspective comes up, I can be like, oh, okay, that's the way I used to do it. Not interested in that anymore. What do you have to say about it, Holy Spirit? So so it doesn't matter about the thoughts. If you have a thought, what matters is, what is your interest in that thought? And what level, from what perspective are you looking at it?
Yes, and according to Course in Miracles, it says, give him the thought and he will give you back the miracle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a place in the Course, and I was really interested in this. I actually did a little video on it. There's a place in the Course where he talks about the miracles, and he's saying that, he's telling us that sometimes we protect something from the miracle. I don't want the miracle to touch this.
Right.
Like maybe someone has a really strong grievance against somebody and they're not ready to give up that grievance. Now the miracle can undo that grievance. But then they're like, don't touch that. I might need that grievance, don't want that healed. Of course, we don't tell ourselves that's what we're doing, but that's what we're doing when it's not healed. We're protecting it from healing. So I thought that was interesting.
Very good.
And may I mention that recently I started branching out. Now my kids are very impressed with this. I started making YouTube videos, and I'm doing them on the lessons, because I do a lesson every day, and I have for years now. Every day I read whatever lesson we're on. I ask Jesus for clarity. I write whatever comes into my mind afterwards. And so recently I started making videos, which I'm pretty impressed with myself, actually. So if you'd ever like to have my own station, so if you'd like to go look at some of my videos, I invite you to do so. Like them, subscribe them. Gosh, I'm sound just like the YouTube people. And then I made a podcast. I've never even listened to a podcast. And I made 2 podcasts. I'm going to make more. My daughter, I think, is going to buy me a special headphone microphone thing to do it better. So for Christmas, I think she's going to get for me for Christmas. So I'm going to start doing more of those. But I made some podcasts, and again, I had no idea. So the guy who takes care of my website, which is kind of a complicated website, you're welcome to visit it, by the way, it's forgivenessisthewayhome.org. He told me, he says, now what you really need to do is TikTok. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. TikTok, I think you like talk for a minute, 2 minutes, maybe. Like I can't even imagine saying anything in only 2 minutes. But I'm pretty encouraged with myself for stepping out and doing all this technical stuff. I can still remember the day I made my first text. I was so proud of myself.
Yeah.
Yes, and guys, I want to mention this as well, because it feels like we're coming to the end of our session now, Myron. But I wanted
Although
to
we
say,
could go on for days.
well, we certainly could. Encourage everyone to follow Myron on Facebook. Her daily posts on Facebook are absolutely just beautiful. I really have to say that, Myron, because I always feel like this is just for me right now in this moment. And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. And that tells me that you're coming from the Holy Spirit.
Well, thank you, Stephanie.
Oh, yeah.
I'm always happy whenever I see your name up there. And I see your posts, which are gorgeous.
They are beautiful.
Thank you.
One of the things that, from my own journey, I can tell you this is that the more that you concentrate on your spiritual side, in other words, you look past the body and seek the Christ in everyone, rather than seeing the body. And the more that you really do this, the more spiritual experiences come your way. And I'm going to tell you, I can attest to that 100%, because I get experiences almost on a daily basis now, where they used to come very sporadically. Now it's like, I don't know any other way of living. It's just the guidance that comes through, and the experiences that you receive are actually mind-blowing. And a lot of them you can't even explain or share with anyone, because they're sort of on a personal basis. But if you concentrate on everyone being who they really are, rather than seeing them as bodies, it will turn your life around 100%. And I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. Well, it's been wonderful being with you guys. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Really joyful, Myron. This has just been an amazing, beautiful. I feel the Holy Spirit so prevalent. I just love it. Now,
I
does
can
anybody
stop
have
there.
any last words? Anything else you want to say quickly? I invite everyone now to take themselves off mute and to thank Myron. We'll give you some love now, Myron. Thank you so much. Love you. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Myron.
so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank
Myron.
you.
Bless you.
It's
Love
been
you.
a blast.
All right, bye-bye, guys.
so awesome.
Thank you, Myron.
Thank you.
Myron.
Thank you.
Love you.
Definitely love you.